the first to introduce the plastic bag charge.
It's legal to let go.
Set the speed and take the hands off. It's almost driverless, but not quite.
Hands is a highly trained police dog.
The force is incredible.
It's really frightening, actually. This is my patch, my specialism. It's also my home.
Mandatory evacuation, you must leave!
For many people, Harvey is far from over.
People here believe the water will be this deep for weeks.
I'm Greg Milam and I'm Sky's chief North of England correspondent.
Are you trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
Sky News, the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people.
Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. So Keir Starmer will join other European leaders for an emergency summit on Ukraine, as President Zelensky warns he will never accept any decisions between America and Russia about Ukraine. NATO countries are under more pressure to increase their spending on defense. And the papal thriller Conclave is among the big winners at tonight's BAFTAs, securing 4 awards, including the coveted Best Film. Hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the Spectator's economics editor, Kate Andrews, and the Financial Times' public policy correspondent, Laura Hughes. Welcome both. Let's see what is on some of those front pages then. The Financial Times looks ahead to tomorrow's emergency summit between European leaders regarding the war in Ukraine. It comes amid concerns that separate talks between the US and Russia could lead to an escalation in the conflict. Well, the Eye points out that Ukraine still hasn't been invited to those talks between Washington and Moscow about its own future. The Times also reports on the emergency meeting and says Sir Keir Starmer hopes to act as a bridge to Trump in the peace talks. Sir Keir Starmer actually writes for The Telegraph, insisting he's willing to deploy British troops to the ground in Ukraine if it means keeping a peace deal in place. The Guardian also reports on the growing fears in Europe over a new US-Russia agreement with the Trump administration. Meanwhile, the Mail leads with news the Prime Minister is refusing to boost the UK's military spending. The Metro leads with a Russian drone strike on the site of the former nuclear power plant at Chernobyl, which has prompted fears of radiation leaks. On The Sun, Tories criticise what they're calling pointless government projects like a shrimp farm in Bangladesh. And with temperatures forecast to hit 17 degrees Celsius on Friday, the Star proclaims, here comes the sun. And we are joined tonight by Kate Andrews and Laura Hughes. So an awful lot to get through in the papers, obviously dominated overwhelmingly by that, well, by 2 meetings really, one in Saudi Arabia, one in Paris. Let's start with the one in Paris and with the front page of the FT. European leaders hold crisis meeting on Ukraine and wider defence plans. Kate, if I can just start with you. I mean, this was the meeting that was sort of called quite quickly by Emmanuel Macron, I think it was on Saturday, as a reaction to the fact that the Europeans were obviously being frozen out.
Emmanuel Macron has called on European leaders to come to the Paris summit. Keir Starmer is going. You have leaders from Poland, leaders from Germany, who are heading to Paris to talk about what Europe's role is going to be as the US and Russia meet for what seem to be the beginning of peace talks. And what's interesting is at the moment you see the US almost trying to slightly play down now these talks. The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, saying this is just the beginning. We will not get a peace deal sitting down in one meeting. But meanwhile, in Paris, you see a ramping up of the discussions. As we move on to the other papers, we'll see Keir Starmer for the first time is talking about putting boots on the ground, British boots possibly in Ukraine if a peace deal is secured. You're seeing European leaders realize that they could very easily be cut out of this process and these conversations, which is so strange to go back to the beginning of this war. It was the UK and then it really was Europe that decided to get in behind Ukraine and lead that charge in terms of support from the outside. To think that they're not going to be part of these conversations has really rattled these leaders. There's also a bigger question about what happens if the US decides it isn't going to support Ukraine anymore and Europe is left alone to pick up that bill and to supply all of those weapons. What would they do? These are huge decisions that have to be made in Paris as these talks happen in Saudi Arabia as well.
And Laura, what's interesting, and the front page kind of hints at that as on its main title, it's not just the European powers that are being frozen out. We don't really have any clarity as to whether Ukraine itself is invited to this first stage of negotiations, in Saudi.
No, I mean, by all accounts, then they have been frozen out, and the Ukrainians are not going to be present at these meetings tomorrow. And that's obviously an enormous statement and making them incredibly nervous. And again, this meeting in Paris comes after the comments last week from the vice president in Munich, where he gave this extraordinary speech that sent seriously ruffled feathers amongst European leaders, sort of putting it on them, saying that the greatest risks to democracy in the world are actually from within Europe and not in China or Russia. And I think that's also part of why we are seeing this very quick turnaround, this sort of last-minute meeting in Paris. There's very much a feeling, guys, we need to get together. We need to come up with a plan. How are we going to respond to this potentially new reality, this new America that's saying things that are completely different to anything we've had before? There are going to be implications for Ukraine, obviously, but also for them themselves.
So that was J.D. Vance, and then Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, said quite clearly that basically European security wasn't really going to be a priority for the US anymore. So do you think that what we're seeing here, Kate, is a reset of relations between Europe and the States, or a break of what we could call a Western alliance?
Well, look, let's hope it's a reset and not a break. A break seems incredibly dangerous and much more concerning. But we have seen this before with Donald Trump. We know that he likes to negotiate. We are familiar with his tactics. We see it with tariffs, and we've also seen it with NATO in the past. When he wants countries to spend more or change their economic habits, we often start talking about global security. Now, this feels heightened. This feels a lot more intense given the circumstances between Russia and Ukraine. But we know that Donald Trump wants European countries to spend more on defense. He's now saying 5%. Not even America does that. Realistically, people think that means about 2.5%, so half that. But given the fact that countries aren't doing that, this is Donald Trump's negotiating tactic. So, look, can we be certain? No. But we have seen this before, and if Europe does start to get more serious when it comes to defense spending and when it comes to providing support, and that may be these comments from Keir Starmer about boots on the ground, perhaps Donald Trump's rhetoric will change.
Yeah, and I mean, Laura, there seems to be agreement in the government that defense spending has to go up somehow. We're at 2.3 now, at least to 2.5%. A lot of people are saying it has to be a lot more than that. There may not be agreement as to where the money is going to come from.
Yeah, and there's no timetable. So even though Keir Starmer's saying, look, Trump, we're going to get there, we're going to get to 2.5% of GDP, no problem. Well, when is that actually going to happen? And given the financial circumstances we're in, Rachel Reeves, the UK Chancellor, is trying to keep everything as tight as possible. She is not opening the purse strings to let Keir Starmer dip in and take money when he wants. And obviously there is huge pressure from particular newspapers that we're seeing as well this evening. Different sort of sections in Parliament have been calling for this. And we obviously had Zelensky, in response to being sort of tied out of these talks, calling for a European army, calling for support. There's real fears that European countries have to give as much as they can to the Ukrainians to protect them, essentially, from whatever might be dictated to them by the Russians and the Americans in these talks. So there's a slight mismatch between what what the UK is promising they're going to do and what actually is going to happen and when. And I think the Americans probably know that. And I think Kate's right. And with Trump, the wider point is that there is a difference sometimes between what he says and then what he does. And he'll say something very extreme so that when he does something a little less wild, we all go, oh, that's a really reasonable proposal. Whereas if he'd gone in
He's
on
lowered everyone's expectations.
Yeah, he's lowered, and so you go, okay. So that he might be playing this very strategically.
I mean, he might not. I mean, certainly when it comes
not.
to tariffs, he's kind of, going through with some of it. If we look at the front page of The Guardian, talks lay bare transatlantic rift over war in Ukraine. Kate, what we were talking about a little bit earlier, what do both of you think when it comes to Keir Starmer playing that role of bridge that we always talk about between, the European continent, if you will, not necessarily just the EU and the United States?
So, whilst it's very clear that he is looking for purpose, he's looking for a way for the UK to still say we are a part of this. Whether or not he gets that is a complete other matter. I do think the UK is well positioned to do what he is proposing. Do Europe and Donald Trump take him up on it? Separate question. But at the moment, especially when it comes to that economic agenda, when it comes to tariffs, for example, the UK has largely been left out of this. Keir Starmer made a smart decision before the election to go over to the States and to talk to Donald Trump and to make sure that relationships were good. It seems that Starmer's relationship with Trump is probably better than many of the relationships currently held throughout the European Union, not least because a lot of those leaders were there when Trump was first there. Starmer is new. So I think he is potentially well positioned to do it. But again, the fact that these meetings are taking place in Saudi Arabia this week and Europe is not being consulted, as far as we're aware, very much at all, that will have him nervous. That will have all of Europe nervous. And they're almost putting proposals forward about how they can be involved. And you can tell the sense in which Trump has once again shifted things so quickly that European leaders feel compelled to make that pitch. And really it is up to Trump whether or not he takes them up on it.
It'll be interesting to see what comes out of that meeting. And of course, Keir Starmer is going there with, I guess, some kind of proposal or a possibility. If we look at the Daily Telegraph, that story that we broke a little earlier, Starmer, I'm ready to put troops in Ukraine. Laura, tell us a little bit more about what he's saying here and how you think it plays into the whole situation.
Yeah, I mean, the article makes clear it's not entirely obvious how this might work, but what we know the French have been proposing is that you would have European forces going in and sort of acting as a layer, essentially, a peacekeeping force. They're not actively going in looking for a fight, but they're there as a guarantee to the Ukrainians that we will step in if we need to. A peace deal's done, Russia says, OK, we're backing off. But if they go against their word, there is something there is some support. That's very much what this is all about. And yeah, clearly, I think this has been talked about, but the fact that you've got the UK Prime Minister the day before these meetings, happening tomorrow, briefing, the Daily Telegraph writing a whole comment piece. It's sending out a message which I'm sure has been conveyed behind the scenes as well. But look here. And clearly, I think Team Starmer believe that Trump has got a different relationship with Starmer and they're just going to try and play it as much as they possibly can. And why not? Now actually is a moment to just give it a go.
It does feel huge, though. The idea that after all this time, now is when the UK would put boots on the ground. As you say, it's being framed as peacekeeping efforts, but it's not hard to imagine a world where if these negotiations get messy, they probably will. Ukraine is not happy at the moment, the way that this is unfolding. If America does get serious about reneging its support for Ukraine, at the same time that the UK might be going in to put boots on the ground for the first time, that could be a fundamental rift between the special relationship. It could be a fundamental rift, as you were saying before, between Europe and America. There are infinite possibilities right now. We hope for the best, but we are so early on in this process. And to think of how different these directions could fundamentally be could see a massive global shift.
Yeah. I mean, Laura, we've got 30 seconds, but do you think that this is the jolt that Europe needed?
Lordy, I mean, it's all, it's all just moving so fast. I almost feel as though a lot of these arguments and conversations have been happening in slow time.
Though? I mean,
now
it's happened over the past few days, but we've kind of known for months, haven't we? We've known since Trump was elected.
In some ways, it's not new, but the way that things have happened so quickly, it's forcing people to come out and make proclamations like Starmer has in the front of a national newspaper.
Yeah. Not surprising, but shocking nonetheless. OK. Kate, Laura, stay with us. Coming up, The Sun wonders why a portion of the UK's foreign aid budget is going to shrink farms in Bangladesh. We'll discuss that next.
a secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime. They don't care for that. Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
In the last 5 years, more than 13,000 farmers have left agriculture in the UK.
Is it going to be viable for the future?
No farmers, no food!
The frustration, the anger, the fact that so many of them are at risk of going bust has now become too much.
You've got to keep hope because one day it's going to be okay.
I'm Dan Whitehead, Sky News' West of England and Wales correspondent.
It's scary what's happening in the country.
It's the illegal migrants that we don't want here.
How difficult is this to police tonight?
Off the scale.
Having the police speak to us so starkly right in the middle of the riot showed just how serious the situation was. The water on board the barge contaminated with Legionella bacteria, an outbreak that was first revealed by Sky News. There have been questions for months over whether the support offered to asylum seekers on the Bivvy is sufficient.
A cruel place to put human beings.
From busy cities to rural communities, we spend every day reporting on how big decisions impact real people. The last smoke and steam rises into the sky above Blast Furnace 4.
Today is a day in history. Remember Talbot?
The closure means more than 2,000 job losses.
It just seems madness.
It is a highly contagious infection. South West Water did apologise again.
This is the revenge porn helpline.
They're helping terrified victims.
You've been a victim of a very common type of online crime known as sextortion.
We're making things better for people.
Stonehenge became the latest victim of Just Stop Oil.
Now I can say I've been to the orange Stonehenge.
Sky News, get the full story first, free, wherever you get your news.
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
Free, wherever you get your news.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
Mandatory evacuation, you must leave!
For many people, Harvey is far from over.
People here believe the water will be this deep for weeks.
I'm Greg Milam and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent.
Are you trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
Sky News, the full story first.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me in the studio, Kate Andrews and Laura Hughes. Let's go straight to the front page of The Sun. We were just discussing, weren't we, how basically, the country needs to spend more on defence. There is no money. Here comes The Sun's headline, £15 billion aid lunacy, and it's about a prawn or prawn crackers. Kate.
Well, you might be confused by this front cover how Vladimir Putin and these prawns are connected. The point that The Sun is making, they've done a deep dive into aid spending and waste, and they're saying that how is it that you're spending tens of billions of pounds on Bangladeshi shrimp farms in terms of the foreign aid budget when that money could potentially be going to getting to 2.5% defense spending, as we were talking about in the first half. And I think that Doge over in the States has really inspired quite a lot of these campaigns. The Spectator just launched its own last week. My colleague Michael Simmons built a database on the Spectator's website where you can basically go and look up all the government waste and do your own research. I think it's a very, very worthwhile effort. Even if these two things don't seem to be related, if you want to find the cash to do the really important stuff that the state needs to do, then you're probably going to have to tackle some of this wasteful spending.
Okay. Laura, let's go to the FT and the front page here. Why is that declining in the housing market? There it is. What's the story about?
Because the baby boomers are paying off their mortgages and us young people are unable to even get on
That's
the housing
generous of you,
lab.
thank you. All right, I'll take it.
And younger people are struggling. They're struggling to raise, the enormous deposits that you need today. The value of houses going up so dramatically compared with wages.
Yeah.
It's creating this inequality, and the data is showing that more and more people are just simply paying them off, and they're owning all their houses while young people are still renting.
Okay.
I think that's exactly right. This is not a good news story, despite the fact that it might appear to be. Housing market debt declines. Well, it's only declining because the baby boomers who are able to acquire all of this wealth are paying off their mortgages, and young people are not getting mortgages because they are not in a position to do so. The housing market remains one of the UK's biggest public policy problems. So no, not actually a positive headline.
But so what impact could this have generationally?
Well, I was thinking that because then clearly you end up with this kind of unfairness in a sense if these baby boomers who obviously are going to want to pass their wealth on or their property on to their children.
So it's inheritance or bank of mum and dad to get a house, basically.
Yeah, and the reality is for so many people, they are completely reliant on their parents or their relatives, grandparents, to help them with their deposits, to help them get on the property ladder. And the more of these people that own the properties, the more they can pass them down. So it's good news. It's good news for someone. But not when you're looking at the kind of intergenerational unfairness.
Well, this is it. The meritocracy element is really missing from the housing market.
Yeah, because now the disparity between wages and the value of a house, especially in certain parts of the UK, is...
It's so unattainable for so many people, and people who are doing everything right on paper. I mean, I think that is what is so frustrating about the housing market for decades now, is you can do everything right and it's still not attainable.
Yeah.
OK, well, definitely a story, that we'll go back to. Let's end on a lighter note. Front page of The Times, recipe for keeping fit, dancing in the kitchen. I mean, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it, Laura? Tell us more.
It does make sense. I mean, it's a small study. I think, 48 people
OK, that is small.
took part.
Yes. But what are they saying?
But I love that they were told by the researchers that they won't be watching them as they do it, so they could just completely let loose and dance in your kitchen. It's a nice story, I think, on top of all the other really heavy news that we have on all the other front pages, basically encouraging us to have a bit of a bop in the morning and not feel self-conscious about it, because it will make you healthier and live longer.
But why the kitchen necessarily? I mean, you can just move anywhere. Dance in the living room?
Anywhere you want.
Okay.
You can dance in the park if you're not going to be, nervous about eyes on you. Basically, movement is good. That's the moral of that story.
Yeah.
OK, they just made a better headline out of that. Kate, Laura, thank you both so much. I'll see you both in the next hour. Thank you. And now let's take a quick look at the weather. The cold theme will last a little longer, but it'll be milder for all by the middle of next week. Expect a largely dry start tomorrow with a patchy frost, but Western Ireland will be wet. Western Scotland and northwest England will see a little rain, sleet and some hill snow as well. That will mostly fade through the morning, but Western Ireland will see further outbreaks of rain. Most of the places look dry, but northeast Britain will see a few blustery showers, some wintry. Cloud will be quite extensive again, but there should be more brightness for southern Britain than recently. It'll be cold for most, milder in the windy west. The afternoon looks mainly dry for Britain, but rain will spread across Ireland to reach Northern Ireland later. Tuesday will bring rain and hill snow to the north, with travel disruption possible. Much of the south looks dry, with plenty of sunshine for England and Wales, but it will still be on the cold side and rather windy. Wednesday looks milder, with rain and strong winds in the west. And let's just end with some of today's other news now. The government says up to £2.5 billion will be allocated to supporting the steel industry. Apart from the new US steel tariffs, the sector is facing challenges from high electricity costs, unfair trading practices, and scrap metal recycling. And things have again become heated on the ice of a US-Canada hockey match as tensions rise about Donald Trump's repeated suggestion that Canada become the 51st state.
By the dawn's early light, what so proudly we hailed.
Quite a lot of booing there, and as soon as the puck dropped in Montreal, the gloves were off and the fists began to fly. The Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, was watching on. It's not clear if he got involved in the booing as well. But the game ended 3-1 to the USA. Coming up next on Sky News at 11, European leaders are to hold an emergency summit on Ukraine as the Americans and Russians prepare for peace talks. We'll have much more on that story at the top of the hour. Stay with us.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people.
Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised.
If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.